Hi, my name is Tyler, and this is the Fox Valley Film Critics. In this episode of the show, we're going to be discussing the next in the lineup of the AFI's Top 100 American Films, The Gold Rush, as well as the newest John Wick film. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the show, brought to you by Groupthink Productions and FVTV. Joining us once again is one of our favorite return guests, AJ.
Thank you for having me back.
And this time I did not mock the hallowed wastelands of Virginia, so...
I appreciate that. Thank you for withholding yourself.
It was mostly out of ignorance.
That's fine.
I'm doing all right, you?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be back. Thank you for having me.
We always go out of our way for you, man. So
I appreciate it.
So, have you seen Gold Rush before?
I have. It was when I was kind of first giving myself film education. It's kind of one of the first classic silent movies that I watched, along with Metropolis, Nosferatu, The Kid, other Chaplin works. But yeah, this one I really enjoyed, and I got the chance to rewatch it in preparation for this show.
All right. I mean, this is my first time for me. When I first got into Chaplin, I immediately jumped on to City Lights, which I think is the one people tend to recommend you go for.
Seems to be that way. My personal favorite is Modern Times.
I've heard good things. I have not seen that yet, but that's coming up. So
it's really good. But I mean, you can't go wrong with him. The Kid, The Circus, his later work in The Great Dictator is a little dated, but some of the points it still makes are extremely poignant even today. And it's incredible that got made in 1940 in the prime of when it hit hardest, when that subject matter mattered.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed watching this for the first time. It's definitely it's definitely a Chaplin movie. He always tends to play the same. He's always the tramp. Mm-hmm. Did he ever not play the tramp, or did he ever?
In his earlier shorts, but kind of when he started more feature lengths. From like 1920 on, he almost always played the tramp. That's kind of how he became known.
Yeah, so he's definitely still playing the same character he's playing in all of his films. Mm-hmm. He's still playing that same personality, except now he's going off to the west to make his fortune in the gold rush.
He's the lone prospector. That's literally his character name in the titles. He doesn't have a name. He's the lone prospector. Everybody else, you got Big Jack or something like that, and Georgia, the girl, but nope, he's just the lone prospector, not even the tramp.
He's the everyman, so it's appropriate.
Exactly, so. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm most aware of this film because everyone and their mother has seen the potato dance scene.
Yep.
So.
Well, they're dinner rolls.
Oh, the dinner rolls.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he made it iconic. Robert Downey Jr. brought it back in the biopic Chaplin. Yeah, it's such an iconic early film image that it comes out of nowhere, kind of in the movie. He doesn't want to give a speech at his imaginary party, so instead he just does this little impromptu dance. And it's delightful.
That's like the most silent filmy thing ever. Is that
Absolutely.
Well, he can't physically give a speech, so.
Well, it's even more interesting. I actually, in preparation for this, I said I watched it again, but I watched the 1942 remastered version.
That was the one I watched.
So. Was it? Okay. The first time I had watched it, I had watched the original with the title cards and everything, proper silent movie style. But no, in 1942, for those of you who don't know, Chaplin re-released it with narration instead. He narrated it himself instead of the title cards, and it's an interesting experiment. It's also converted into 24 frames per second, so it's a smoother looking film than most of the silent films and the original film was. And even the re-release even got nominated for a couple Oscars. I think it got like best sound and best original score.
That's unique.
It was very interesting for a movie that didn't really come out that year, but it worked. I mean. And obviously, it's a classic. You understand why he was who he was. He's such a relatable little a protagonist. You root for him, and you pity him when life is down, but in the end, when everything works out, you just you cheer along with him. It's impossible not to like the Tramp.
It's always interesting to me how all of Chaplin's films came right as sound was becoming a thing. So they all kind of play with different ideas of how to record sound to it without ever going into full sound film, which is
a little bit. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it wasn't until 1940, the Great Dictator, that he ever spoke on screen. You know, he had done songs before, but that iconic speech that he gives in The Great Dictator, I mean, that came from the greatest silent film star. It's incredible that he had that versatility.
That's the whole point of that film.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's funny just because people, when sound first became a thing, they didn't know what to do with it.
Very much so.
And the first thought was all the silent stars were like, oh, well, we'll just record a pre-recorded orchestra to it, so we don't have to distribute, so we don't have to pay organists.
Mm-hmm.
And that's clearly what Chaplin tries to do with the first cut of this, and obviously with the second cut where they had the narrator.
Sure.
So they're just still trying to go about as business as usual as slapstick silent film stars during the sound era. So it's this wonderful just mismatch of technology being used in service of something very new. So,
But it's admirable almost. It's somebody still succeeding in that quickly dying medium in the 30s. Obviously this was released before The Jazz Singer, the first sound film, but his later work, you're absolutely right. He held to his old standards, and those movies are still held up even amidst the growing medium.
Yeah, I mean, there's something kind of sad about it too. I mean, obviously it's because a lot of those stars just did not make the transfer to the post sound, post code.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, it completely changed the game, and that's why it's amazing that he had that staying power.
The 30s is just the weirdest decade for all film, because you go from 1929.
That's a debate.
1929 was The General, and in 1939 was Gone with the Wind. The space between those two films is a decade.
Well, but then you look at the changing landscape of film in the late '60s into the '70s, and that was
cultural
in terms
pushing.
of subject matter, just as big of a cultural switch. You had. I'm trying to think of a good example. You had the greatest show ever told, or whatever the big spectacle was in the '50s, to The Godfather and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, movies like that, winning Best Picture instead.
Well, that's the subject matter of film changing, as you said. It's not the actual form of technology evolving in a decade.
Absolutely, the technical innovations of the late 20s and the 30s have probably, you're right, never been matched in terms of how quickly things changed.
Yeah, and it's changes like that tend to destroy careers. I mean, the '60s opened careers. You lost a lot of the studio directors from the '50s and '60s. The John Fords couldn't really survive in the new paradigm of the '70s, but it gave
even Hitchcock kind of died out. Well, he did just get older, but at the same time, yeah, it was harder for them to thrive.
But it created new possibilities.
Absolutely.
And I feel like the opposite happened in the '30s, where it removed a lot of options off the table.
I think it created different opportunities, but for film stars like Chaplin, who had that staying power and had that goodwill with the audience, he was still able to make three or four of his greatest movies.
Even that was limited, though, because by the time he was doing Modern Times, that was towards the end of it. He was really losing his power by that point.
True.
And he was independent, so he wasn't part of the studio system, really.
Yeah, directed his own movies. He was really an auteur before that term was ever used. Those movies are his. He's the star. He's the director. All he needed was to be put on screen, and magic happened. He just had that charm. Him, Buster Keaton, Harold Lloyd, all had that silent charisma.
Buster Keaton didn't even have the staying. Well, I would argue Keaton's films are a little better, but he didn't have the staying power that Chaplin did. But he finished his career kind of failed right before Chaplin's took off.
Yeah,
so.
he did not survive into the sound era like Chaplin barely was able to. Yeah, it's sad, and those are the biggest stars. You think of the silent actors that just completely lost their career, lost to history with the invention of sound and film, and it's a interesting era in history because it opened up different opportunities for actors who became stars with their speaking roles to the detriment of and at the expense of those silent film stars. Even somebody like Rudolph Valentino, who was like the heartthrob of the 20s. Never heard from again, kind of after 1927.
Well, they did show up. They showed up as ironic roles in like the
Exactly.
background of
but
Sunset
but that's
Boulevard.
almost as just like, oh, him. It's not an actual prestige role. You know?
I can't imagine they even got paid that much for those cameos either. But
I don't know. I'm sure it was just nice for them to be appreciated, but unfortunate that their careers couldn't thrive like they once did.
that's all the time we have for this segment. Join us for the following segment. We'll be discussing John Wick Chapter 3. Stay tuned. Hello, welcome back. So, jumping into John Wick 3, I always kind of like that they've gotten to a tradition now where every single one of these films has like a clip from a silent film right at the beginning of it. Have you noticed that?
I noticed it in the second one. I didn't notice it in the first and the third.
There wasn't in the first one, but there's a brief cameo. I think it was the goat, the Buster Keaton film, The Goat, in this one, where you just see like a brief frame of it, and then the movie cuts it back into right at the beginning, and it cuts back into the normal story. So
Interesting. I didn't notice that, or at least I don't remember it. Then again, I did see all three of them back to back to back. So
Oh, man.
things might have gotten missed.
that is a lot of
That's
killing.
a lot of adrenaline. There's a lot of testosterone.
Good grief.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
So what is since you just watched the whole franchise, what is your thought on everything now that we've had some time to pass on this whole thing?
In terms of the trilogy, they really have kind of cashed in on the. It seemed like they've jumped onto the more is better train, which I don't know that I always agree with. The second one is undeniably just more of everything than the first one. I think the third one kind of falls in that. It's so much. It's throwing so much more at you. It expands the world. The choreography is so much more fine-tuned. The action scenes are even longer. It seems like they never end. I feel like that's the action scene with the dogs on the third one. It was like a 20-minute sequence, it seemed like, and it just kept going. But I never got bored.
Yeah, somehow Halle Berry was the highlight of this film. I don't know how those words are even possible coming out of my mouth.
Well, you know, she had the dogs highlighting her performance.
Well, I thought her performance was pretty good.
She was very solid. She had an interesting backstory.
Her half hour of screen time is the most empathetic I've ever seen her in a role ever. So.
Well, I haven't seen Monsters Ball, the one she won the Oscar for.
I haven't seen that either. I'm just familiar with her for her infamous like Die Another Day roles, because she does.
Or Storm. She's not great at Storm either.
She's not good at Storm.
But yeah, she really is. She's really good in this, and you're right. Of all the characters that the series has kind of used to expand the universe and kind of go worldwide, which is actually one of my issues with it. She's by far the most interesting.
Okay, I should say this movie seems to have gotten basically universal praise from fans of the series. I don't see a lot of people complaining about it. I think it's because they basically got what they wanted, which was they want to see John Wick murder people very, very violently.
And so they certainly got that.
If that's what you want, you will not complain.
And the action set pieces are incredible. No one can fault that. The scene in the library with the NBA player, I'm blanking on his name. The horse, the stable, the dogs. It's.
Unfortunately, I have to put my objective critic hat on. I think it's lost the plot a little.
I agree. Well, that was easy.
Well, now's the point where everyone just goes, "Oh man, the critics are just wrong about everything."
It's a problem though when you have this almost secret society of assassins like they introduce, and like the Continental Hotel, such a fascinating world that they introduce you in the first one, and it seems so close and tight knit, and like you can imagine why no one would ever, how they would be able to be so stealthy and never be caught. And then by the time you get to the second one, even like every homeless man in New York is an assassin, and the third one, I like, it seems like literally everybody in New York is trying to kill John Wick, and it does not make sense.
I mean, that's
how is this world continuing to thrive if everybody has a gun and is running through the streets of New York trying to kill each other?
I mean, there's an even simpler problem that at play this movie. I don't know what John Wick's motivation is anymore. Like the first movie, he had a very clean-cut motivation that was, I must avenge the dog. The dog must be avenged. The second movie was, I must kill the guy that blew up my house.
Well, it was more so he had that like the blood oath with that guy that he couldn't get out of, and so his hand was forced. I don't remember the trite plot line that they had in the third one that caused him to wreak havoc in this one.
Well, it was just because he killed Santino at the end of the second movie, so now all of his bridges have been burned, and now he's just on his own. But I don't think I Want to Survive it doesn't work quite as well as a strong driving motivation for the character as it did in the first and second film. So at times it feels like he's kind of just aimlessly walking around, which is why the Halle Berry scene works so good, because her scene is like the most empathetic scene in the movie, because she has a visceral anger moment where she loses it and just starts murdering people, and is like, oh, it's basically the first movie again in miniature form. So,
yeah, well, they killed the dog. You don't do that.
They didn't successfully kill the dog. They shot her dog.
That's true. That's true. Still, equally unforgivable.
Exactly.
Basically, the overarching theme of these movies is don't hurt dogs, or you will die.
Casual sociopathy. Yes.
And you know what? That's a good message. Don't hurt dogs. I agree with that.
I mean, that makes dog owners sounds like mildly sociopathic, though. It's like, oh, you hurt my dog. I mean, that's not to say you should hurt dogs. Thankfully, I love dogs.
Thankfully, not every dog owner is John Wick. Otherwise, we would be in trouble.
Oh my, that'd be a world to live in.
But yeah, and like I said, Halle Berry is the kind of the one character that you care about that they introduce in this vast, now worldwide universe of these assassins. Like, who the heck is this ancient one guy that they just randomly introduce, and he cuts off his spoilers? He cuts off his finger for no reason, and then he gives him advice, and then he just leaves. And what was the point of him?
Well, it's so weird in the context of the plot, because he goes
What plot?
He goes to Casablanca so he could try to find a way to meet the guy who runs the council.
Right.
And it turns out the guy who runs the council is just a dude that lives in the middle of the Moroccan desert.
He's just like this 20-something guy. How? It does, and like.
I mean, that doesn't necessarily bother me, because my problem is from that point on, the plot just turns into nonsense character decisions and excuses for violence.
Yeah, excuses for him to reuse old Matrix lines. Guns, we're gonna need guns.
And then, the showdown at the Continental is probably one of the best choreographed fight scenes in.
100%. Well, that's because they got people from the raid to be in it.
Well, yeah, exactly.
And it's like I said, the action scenes, while extensive, impossible to take your eyes off of because they're so well done.
My problem with it is just it doesn't lead to anything cathartic. At the end of it, it's a lead into a prospective fourth movie that they just announced. So it's.
I completely agree with you. Unfortunately, these movies, while spectacles, are not elevating the genre in any way. They're impeccable action movies, and not a whole lot more.
I feel like if this movie had cut off the main arc of the 3 movies at the end of it, I would be a little more forgiving of it. But it feels like very gratuitous just to keep dragging out what John Wick's ultimate solution to fixing this universe is.
Which are we? What is that? What could it possibly be at this point?
My initial thought was, I mean, I don't want to spoil what happens, but maybe like Winston lets him like go live in a house in the middle of upstate New York or something with a dog. I'm like,
and then something's gonna happen to that dog, and then he's gonna have to go out again, and
then he'll murder a small town of bikers, and he'll reveal his presence. But at the very least, I'd like him to achieve some point of like relative calm and stasis. Yeah.
That's, and I think that's what they think drives the plot, is just us hoping that he can put an end to this for once and for all. But they just keep introducing more and more people to, like I said, the entirety of New York is now trying to kill him, and it's giving him no chance for peace, and therefore making me lose interest in that the hope that he'll ever reach that.
Yeah, it's a frustrating quagmire. I don't quite know how you resolve that in any sort of meaningful way.
I think you,
plus
honestly, what they're doing, just appealing to the fans who are there for the action, for the long fight scenes, that's why they're successful. But for those of us who kind of want a little bit more than that, a reason to care about the fights, it's a little lacking.
How dare you be a snob and just want more out of movies?
Excuse me for wanting to care about a character I'm spending 2 hours
Exactly.
with.
I've been on a bit of a tirade lately about the people that are complaining about critics, so forgive me on this, but...
So what is this, your 22-year tirade now?
No. It's going to last 22 years.
Fair enough.
I shall rage until I am a 46-year-old man.
Well, you gotta rage about something.
Useless things are the best things to rage about.
And that's
what
what
everyone does
John
anyway.
Wick. Tie it up. Bring it back full circle.
When I was a young man, a movie came out called Star Wars: The Last Jedi.
No.
That's all the
Keep
time
it
we
to-
have for this segment. Join us for the final segment. We'll be getting AJ's movie recommendation for this week. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back. Time for AJ to give us his movie recommendation of the week.
Well, to get the obvious out of the way, I think it goes without saying, I recommend the entirety of Charlie Chaplin's filmography. I haven't seen a bad movie he's made, or a movie that didn't at least put a smile on my face. That being said, I want to relate something more to John Wick. One of my favorite things about the series is the vibrant colors it uses. They're really beautiful movies to look at, and that's because of kind of the shades of neon they use, and they're not only are they spectacularly choreographed, but they're well shot, and they're just really nice to look at. It's really crisp. So I wanted to recommend a movie that combines that beautiful aesthetic as well as the action choreography. So I decided on 2002's Hero, the Jet Li movie. It's a very simple plot about this man, Jet Li, this warrior, coming to the emperor, and basically the emperor is congratulating him for fights he's won for his country, and it shows the flashbacks to those fights, and as he tells the stories and kind of proves his loyalty, he's allowed to move closer and closer to the emperor in this room. He starts off very far apart, and he moves closer and closer with each story, and you realize eventually what his purpose in that room is. But the beautiful thing about Hero, literally the beautiful thing, is each story that he tells has a different color palette. I think there's a gray fight, which is just a beautiful, almost black and white fight. There's a vibrant green fight. There's a red fight, yellow fight, blue fight, and each of them, it's partially done in post, the coloring, but also the set pieces are gorgeous, and the colors are so vibrant, and the choreography is so spectacular. That it's one of just the most visually stunning movies I've ever seen. And even with its deceptively simple plot, it keeps you engaged. It's a good plot mechanism that kind of justifies each of these colorful fight scenes.
Okay, I never actually seen any Jet Li movies. I mean, I obviously I saw the.
Not even the Expendables.
Actually, I haven't seen Expendables, so.
You're not missing out.
Yeah,
But he is in those.
I just remember seeing the title of the one at one point and being like, oh, this is just a Matrix ripoff, and I assumed it was kind of like one of those like second tier action stars, but I wasn't sure. So.
Well, he predated the Matrix, I believe.
I'm sure he doesn't an actor. So.
But I mean, he's obviously an incredible martial artist and a stuntman. You know, much in the same vein as Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan, who preceded him. And actually, Donnie Yen or Ip Man, is kind of one of the more kind of succeeded Jet Li in that martial art, the #1 martial artist in the world, movie star vein. And he had a small some role in one of the fights in Hero. That's kind of one of his first roles, and Jet Li and Donnie Yen fight, which is something that kind of martial arts cinema fans have had wet dreams about for years.
All right, that's cool. I've seen the first Ip Man.
Mm-hmm.
It took me forever to figure out how to pronounce that title. It was like Ip Man. I thought it was IP Man.
I've heard it both ways. But, you know.
I met a few people that are like very strident. No, it's Ip Man.
I think it is Ip Man.
All right. I mean,
You know, when in doubt, listen to the loudest people, right?
Oh, this is just the best advice. This can only end well for everyone involved.
But yeah, I recommend anybody who just appreciates beautiful images and anybody who enjoys watching well choreographed scenes. Hero is a near perfect movie.
That's all the time we have for this episode of the Fox Valley Film Critics. If you want to find past recordings of the show, you can do so on the Groupthink Productions YouTube page. You can follow me on Twitter at @antisocialcritic, that's critic without the C at the end of it. And you can find my written reviews at Geeks Under Grace and Legal Insurrection. I'm Tyler with the Fox Valley Film Critics. Have a wonderful day.